My approach has always been never to be the loudest, but to try and make the most considered point in the room. I think sometimes you need to break out of that to make a point.
And why is that where you've landed?
How do I ask the right questions to get the right information out of them to make the right informed decisions across the board? Yeah, I mean, the one we've touched on is probably the biggest for me. I've seen leaders who are quite quiet people, might be introverts, but actually have an amazing impact on an organisation.
That's quite a profound insight. Welcome back to the Growth Distillery for another episode of Unfiltered in partnership with the Marketing Academy. I'm delighted to be joined by Nicole Bardsley, who is recently appointed the Head of Marketing for Uber and Uber Eats Australia and New Zealand. Awesome job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nicole is also a former CMO of Cash Rewards. She has held a litany of senior executive roles in marketing and strategy across brands in telco, banking, media. You're a long-serving mentor at the trenches. But as we've been saying on this series, that's the A side. What I would love to know and what I'm hoping the audience will love to hear is what's the B side to Nicole's story?
I've moved in different industries, worked across, as you said, marketing roles in various different categories over time and worked my way up. I'm more of a specialist in brand, but I've got kind of reasonably broad marketing experience. I think the thing that I have always wanted to do is progress, obviously, and move forward in my career. And I'm a mum of two little boys. Yep. They're 6 and 8. And aside from, a full-time job keeping you really busy, they keep me incredibly busy outside of work as well. And one of the things that I found in that when I was first starting out to think about having a baby and starting a family is, what's the right time to move to that next role? And, when can I fit in a baby once, I still want to be progressing and moving into a next role and progressing with my career. And I found that really tricky one to think about and how to kind of manage. And I'd been at Virgin Mobile for about 5.5 years. I'd had my first son, Henry, when I was there. It was 2015 when I did the Marketing Academy, and I started that year doing the Marketing Academy and getting married, and I finished it having my first son. And there was a lot of growth and personal development that happened over that period of time, and I really got to a point where I was like, I need a new challenge when I came back from mat leave. But is it the right time to do that? I've got a 1-year-old at home, and how do I juggle that? So I just thought I'd throw my hat in the ring and explore what was out there. And I was lucky enough to get offered the job of Head of Brand and Strategy at Westpac. Now, there's an interesting story there in terms of the timeline of events.
Take us through it.
Signed my contract with Westpac, went to resign at Virgin Mobile and found out I was pregnant with my second son. And obviously I felt a lot of, oh damn, I'm really letting them down by doing this at this point in time. And I felt quite apprehensive about telling them. Obviously, I waited a period of time until you start telling people. And when I went in and I met with who was Adrian, who was going to be my new leader at Westpac, I think that was a time that I saw what a great leader is, because the reaction that I received was amazing. He was happy for me as a person, the fact that I was having a baby. He didn't care about the timing and actually had an attitude of, don't apologise. This is amazing news. I'm so happy for you. And how long do I have you? So let's make the most of the time that we have. And don't worry, we're investing in you in the long term, not in this next 5-6 months.
An amazing
so
sentiment.
It was such a relief to have someone react so positively to that piece of news, which I was obviously, a little bit worried about. And the reason I share that is that I've since had someone in my team previously at Cash Rewards who went through a similar process in their mind where they had fallen pregnant. I'd only just started in the role. They came to me and they were almost apologising that it was an inconvenience that they were going off to have a baby. And I don't think anyone having a baby should ever see it as an inconvenience. It's a wonderful thing to be building and growing your family. And, we're very lucky that we're able to do that. So, I imparted the same piece of advice that I was given, which is don't be sorry, take as long as you need. It isn't about this next short term. It's about what you're going to do here longer term in this business that matters. And I think it's important to realise that it's not just about what we do during the day and what we do for work. It's about our kind of full self. And I think as a leader, it's very important to bring that full self to work.
There's a lot there. There's about 4 things I want to tap on. Everything from, you mentioned a great leader, so I want to understand what you think great leadership looks like.
Yeah.
But I think one of the first comments that I picked up on was this tug of war between professional ambition and personal ambition. And,
Yeah.
I have a wife, we've got 2 kids very similar age to you, and I've seen this play out even in my household. For those that might be staring down the barrel of those decisions, and you're right, both are amazing outcomes, and how do you go about juggling those 2 ambitions, and where do you feel as though we sometimes get it wrong, particularly in young women that might make sacrifices that they don't need to?
Yeah, look, it's no lie that it's a juggle. It's a constant juggle. It's still a juggle on a daily basis. I think thinking that you can't have both is probably where people sometimes go wrong. And it might mean that one has to take more of the front seat and one takes the back seat for a period of time. And certainly in those early days of going off on mat leave, and I had 2 boys about two and a bit years apart. So there was this kind of choppy sort of part of my career where I was on work, off work, on work, off work. And thinking that you can't do both is probably the mistake. You can. I think it's about thinking about what's important to you right now. And sometimes that might mean the career takes a little bit of a backseat because you're right there in the trenches, up in the middle of the night, and you can't do the 9-to-5 thing.
Yep.
And that's okay. And it's about being kind to what you need at that point in time. But there comes a point where you get where you want that more, and then that's okay as well. So I think we tend to carry a lot of guilt and think we have to sort of deny ourselves one or the other. But I think it's about trying. There is a place where you can strive to have both, but it's a bit of give and take, and just kind of acknowledging that for what it is, because it actually doesn't last forever. It's actually a really, in the span of your career, it's actually a really short period of time that you're actually in this period where you've got really young kids, and you don't want to miss that.
Yeah.
And you blink and it's over.
There was a great quote from a podcast that you get 10 summers. We think that we think that we have all of this time with our kids.
Yeah.
But in reality, as you and I both know, under 4, that you're not really creating those lasting memories. The sort of the postcard memories, and by 14, they want nothing to do with mum and dad.
Correct.
So in reality, you get 10 summers to create all of that memory. And we're all human. That there's times where you might have wobbled off that tightrope and gotten it maybe wrong, and had to pick yourself up and be kind to yourself, and not harbour that guilt. I'd love for you to talk through an example and how you went about course correcting so that, you didn't get weighed down by the guilt that I think is a very real thing.
I think that's where coaches and mentors come in really well to help you, and just chats with other people. You've got young kids. We had a chat before, other people understand.
We're all in this together.
We all, there's nothing like a good vent about what you're going through. And I think, certainly that has certainly helped me, learning from other leaders, not in necessarily a formal mentor capacity, but where they've just been able to talk to me about, well, how did they manage to keep progressing with their career, but at the same time juggle the demands of a young family, and getting their advice. It can be simple as, I get this meal service, or I get help with these other things at home that just help give you those little tips to help you through that period of time. So I think, mentorship has been one that's, and that's probably informal more than anything. And then having a coach as well, and, working. So I've been lucky enough through Marketing Academy, but also some of the organisations that I've worked with, Virgin Mobile and Cash Awards as well, to be gifted the benefit of a life coach to help you kind of work on. Sometimes it's not about, what's going on in your career. It's just how do I get stuff happening outside of work to enable me to bring the best version of myself
Or just to
day
work
to
through
day.
the problem, right?
Yeah.
You might just be sitting in the problem and they just help you
Helps to
push
talk
through
it
the
out.
bushes.
Yeah.
For those that are tuning in that might not know where to start with mentorship and coaching, because I fundamentally agree in the role that they play in successful professional careers. Is there any guidance you could give them as to what the first step might be? How would you go about finding a mentor, even informally, or speaking to a company, or even on your own, off your own back, so to speak, for a coach?
I agree. I think when you think about mentors, it feels quite daunting to go and ask someone, will you be my mentor? And what are you actually asking for? What period of time do you want them to, and how much time do you want them to give up? So, I mean, ask them to go for a coffee is my advice. I think that's the simplest way in. And, there are, formal mentorship programs that you can get on through things like the Trenches or the Marketing Academy has one as well. But I think often it's just the people that I admire in my career that I think I have something to learn from, that might have a point of view that's different to my own, or have a perspective, or that I just want to see what their opinion is on something, is reaching out and seeing if they'll go for a coffee, or even not, just picking up the phone and having a chat with them as well. Like I've tended to not have as many formal mentors outside of programs like the Marketing Academy. I've more got leaders that I respect or that I've learned a lot from and that I stay in contact with. And, even when I was going through the process of thinking about where to from cash rewards and the Uber interview process, an old boss of mine is a bit of an informal mentor for me. And I just picked up the phone to just bounce things off him and just get his point of view on things and what he thought. And that's really invaluable. It helps give you just that little extra push forward, or that little extra bit of confidence to know that you're making the right decision.
All right, I want to change gear a little bit. I'm going to walk in and have a chat to the teams that you currently lead or have led recently, and I'm going to ask them, how would you describe Nicole as a leader? What would they tell me?
They would say that, I always talk about this in terms of the C's, so they'd say I'm very calm.
Okay.
So it takes a lot to rattle me. On the outside.
Yeah, like a duck over water.
The inside may be a different story at times, that I'm very caring. So I guess my approach to leadership is it's a really people first.
Yep.
I care for the individual and what they've got going on in their life, as well as what they're contributing to the organisation. And I think that's a really important thing that I've picked up and tried to embrace throughout my leadership. And I think the other one would be considered rather. So really my sort of approach, like I've never been the loudest person in the room. You can't see here, but I'm, quite petite, female, relatively softly spoken. And so my approach has always been never to be the loudest, but to try and make the most considered point in the room or things like that. So I think they would say that. And then lastly, courageous as well. So
4 C's.
4 C's. Did I say 3?
Yeah, that's all right. There's
I
no
got 4
quota.
now.
There's no quota on C's.
And that having that courage to challenge and to stand up for what I believe in, and to speak up if I see something that I'm not comfortable with.
And why is that where you've landed?
Why
on the 4 C's?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the stuff that's bubbled to the surface?
It's the stuff that people have told me consistently over my career. I'd always get people comment and go, "Oh, she's so calm," and you say some very considered things. You always think before you speak. So definitely, I've held on to those things because that's what I've received as feedback from people. Whereas I guess the courageous piece has been an aspiration of mine to really strive and push myself there as well.
I mean, even in the short time that we've spent together, I think I can attest to at least 3 of the 4 C's. But with all leadership styles, there is often a sting in the tail or a blind spot that comes with that. With you, that posture that you bring, where does that get you into trouble?
I think sometimes you need to break out of that to make a point. So sometimes that has held me back, I think, in going for or getting my point across. I think the other thing that slight deviation of your question, but I think it's made me, I think one of the things I've had to realise over as I've progressed and learned a lot over the last 20 or so years is that I don't have to have all the answers. And I think when I first started out, I thought I did. Like I really thought that I needed to learn and work as hard as I could and learn as much and retain as much and be an expert in all these different areas of marketing so that I could have an informed point of view.
Yep.
And I think when you start to take on those leadership roles, you get into a point where you realise that you can't. I mean, first of all, it's exhausting to try and know everything and to be the expert on everything, but that actually your job becomes how do you assemble a team of those experts around you that bring that diverse perspective and that are subject matter experts in particular areas. And your job becomes much more about how do I ask the right questions to get the right information out of them to make the right informed decisions across the board. So I think that has been a key learning. And I've actually witnessed that with other leaders go the other way, where if they haven't necessarily realised that that's the job of leadership is to gather those
double
people
down on that
together.
bad behaviour. I need to know everything.
If they need to know everything, they want to be in a position of knowledge to make every single decision that, first of all, it's exhausting. They can't get there with there's too much information out there right now. There's too many different disciplines in running a business, but also the impact it has on the people in that team is it's very disempowering for their expertise and their opportunity and their growth. And I think I've witnessed that firsthand, the impact it has on people. And I think that's something that more leaders need to realise.
There's two areas I'd like to double click on. You mentioned sort of transitions that you make when you get to sort of the pointy end of the spear.
Yeah.
This sort of being comfortable in imperfect information and, understanding that you can no longer be the specialist. I'd love your perspective on what are some of the other transitions as you go from senior management into really executive leadership roles. Were there any other sort of chasms that you crossed that on reflection, you would have loved to have known beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, the one we've touched on is probably the biggest for me. I think that also that notion of bringing your full self and being really vulnerable is really, really important. If I think back to like young Nicole starting out in her careers, I had the work version, which was very professional and would say all the right things and, behave in a certain way. And then there was home Nicole, which was just the more relaxed version. I think at some point in time, there is no two versions anymore as, I've got older and developed. And I think that's important because being able to bring that full self to work and be vulnerable can be a really powerful thing. If I think about the times that I've been moved the most in my career by a particular leader to kind of inspire a group of people, it's where they've got really passionate and sometimes quite vulnerable about their own experiences or why they believe so passionately about what we're trying to do in the organisation. And I think that's actually what inspires people and gathers people around and makes them go the extra mile to support you.
It can really galvanise a team.
It does, yeah.
The other area that you mentioned was, the leadership fallacy, right? That you have to be across all things. I'd love your take. What are some of the other things, these truisms that we buy into as leaders or aspiring leaders, these things that we think are going to separate us from the herd, but in fact do the opposite, just weigh us down?
I think, needing to have all the answers and be the primary decision maker on and everything is key. I think there's like a vision of like being a great public speaker or a great orator that can tell a really, really amazing, compelling story. I've seen leaders who are quite quiet people, might be introverts, but actually have an amazing impact on an organisation. I think always having to be strong and to not show emotion and to always have, to be able to pick yourself up straight away and move on. I think resilience is incredibly important, but sometimes an organisation needs to see that you're pausing to acknowledge the magnitude of a change that everyone is going through and communicate that it might be hard at times. And
never heard it put quite so eloquently, acknowledging that you're pausing to recognise the magnitude of a change. I don't think any of us do that enough.
No,
I think
we're
that's
often,
quite a profound insight.
we're often like ready to like, okay, right, so we've just made a big org change or change in strategy or something, and it's like on to the next thing. We need to get everyone. It's like sometimes people just need a moment to pause and reflect before they move on.
All right. If we shifted our mirror from rearward to forward facing, and you look at, not just in the teams that you're going to lead, but, in executives that you'll follow, what do you think the foundational building blocks for the next decade are going to be for exceptional leaders? Are they the same? Do you think that there's going to be shifts in terms of those postures that are going to be required to lead the next generation of executives?
I think having leaders that care about the full person and that have a really caring approach is key and critical, because we all have a choice and to stay or to go in all the organisations that we work for, and often it's the people that you stay for. It's also the vision and the opportunity and the role, but when it comes down to, and it might sound a bit cliche, but most people will say it's the people that they love working with. So I think that is, incredibly key. Having an investment in kind of the right type of training and development for people and investing in allowing people to grow, I think is really critical. And
I want to go deeper on that in a minute.
Yeah, and making sure that that's a priority from the CEO and the executive teams, I think is really important, because a lot of organisations offer that now, and it's an added extra. There's a whole, are we back in the office full time? Are we still hybrid? I don't know what the right answer is there, but that will obviously play out. How do we allow flexibility to adapt?
There's a whole separate episode on that.
I feel like I don't even want to go there. But yeah, I think that's really important.
What I call whole of self leadership, right?
Yep.
This idea of balancing two selves, I agree, is an absolute fallacy. I really love that you've come out with sharpening the axe and refining your craft. I think that's something I'd love to pick your brain on. And if there was a third?
Diversity,
okay.
I think.
What do you mean by that?
I mean by ensuring that in key teams you've got a diversity of thought amongst the organisation, because I think we all have our own bias. We tend to hire people that are like ourselves, and making sure that we're bringing diverse perspectives, diversity from, race, ethnicity, gender as well is important, but diversity of thought I'm primarily thinking about there as well.
Can we touch on it on learning and education? I think this is something that I'm deeply passionate about as a leader. As someone that probably can't find enough hours in the day, how do you go about doing that yourself? Because the playbook for delivering great training and development programs for teams, I think is a bit more evident. But once you get into these senior executive roles, and especially if you've got that thirst for learning, how do you go about refining your craft? And what does that even look like? And you and I were talking about this before, where there's nowhere really to go but laterally, unless you want to fundamentally pivot.
Yeah, I think taking the opportunities where you get the opportunity for time out is critical. I had the benefit of going on a 5-day intensive leadership course last year from the Centre for Creative Leadership, and they've got a kind of human-centred approach to leadership, which really resonated with me, and that involved lots of personality testing, lots of, filling in forms about how you respond to stuff. But that stuff gives you quite a good insight, 360 feedback, and then kind of an intensive 5 days. And that was an amazing investment, which I was lucky to be supported on, which I'm very, very thankful for. But that only happens kind of once a year, or not even that sometimes. I think the little moments that you get, so listening to podcasts, this one.
Big fan.
But yeah, listening to podcasts is a key one, whether it be going for a walk or on the commute into the office, that sort of thing, that gives you like that 10-minute window each day. Blinkist.
Yeah,
fan
huge
of Blinkist?
Yeah.
It's a good opportunity.
As an entry point. as an entry point.
Yeah, if it's a particular topic that you're like, do I have the time to invest in reading this book, or can I listen to a 10-minute version of it first to see if it's worthwhile?
For those that have never heard of Blinkist,
the
Twitter version of what Blinkist is?
Blinkist is essentially an app which gives you, it's like if you're as old as I am, you remember Cliff Notes at school, and it gives you a play that you're reading or a book that you're reading. It gives you the quick summary of the key themes so you can understand whether it's something you want to delve deeper into.
The ocean of nonfiction in 10 pages.
Correct, yeah. But as a podcast as well, as an audio book. So that's helpful too. I did that on a couple of different books that I was just recently interested in, and it just gives you that quick snapshot. You often still learn something in those little moments. So yeah, if you get those opportunities for those big chunks of time, take them, but finding those little windows. And then I think there's also like my 8-year-old taught me something about you could do on Google the other day. There's this reverse learning and mentorship that our children offer us as well. And I had no idea how he did that, but he showed me, and now I know.
I can honestly say I have learnt more from my children than anyone else on earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, last question from me, Nicole. If you could go back to yourself 15 years ago, knowing what you know now, with all of the success that you've earned, and give yourself a couple of pieces of advice that would set you up for success, but maybe with a little bit less of the scenic route, what would that be?
I think I would tell myself at certain points in my career where I haven't been happy where I was, I thought I should stick it out. And I think I would say you don't always have to stick it out. You can look out and see what else is out there. I think I would tell myself that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And that to think about your career like, you've got lots of years. It's not about how fast you can get there. Sometimes it's about gathering diverse experience along the way. And to really just say yes to every opportunity that you're presented with, especially the ones that scare you.
I love that. And I think that that's a phenomenal note to end on. Nicole, thank you so much for coming and having a chat. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.